Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's episode, I'd like to give you one quick little tip in case you are interested in visualizing your own research. Let's say you have already published a couple of papers and you are applying to some academic position. And so there's nothing wrong with, in your CV, including your list of papers such as this. But if you want a more intuitive, beautiful, visual way of presenting that, this kind of a link that takes you to this wonderful image, you might want to use today's sponsor called Litmaps. Their tool is excellent at doing many, many things when it comes to visualizing research. So you can use it to visualize research gap, to visualize particular scientists and their work, and so on. But in this case, you can use it also to represent your own research as a beautiful research map. So here's basically, I used it in 30 seconds working with one of my clients, Eddie, to transform his list of publications from this to this. And all I basically did was I took his papers, I uploaded them to Litmaps, and I modified basically how I want this map to look like. So each of these little bubbles is corresponding to, the size of them is corresponding to how much they are cited. And if you go from left to right, that's how recent those papers are. So check out Litmaps. I am the one who reached out to them to sponsor this podcast because I've been using their tool for quite some time in many use cases, and they are just a group of awesome people. Check them out. The link is in the description and in the first comment below. And you might get something off. I forget the number. Like if you do the premium option, you get some percentage off if you use my link down below. So do use that. Thank you all, and let's start with this episode. Hello, everyone. Today I'm speaking with Samira Hosseini. Samira is a Ph.D. of biomedical engineering, and she has done her scientific training at some of the world's most renowned institutions, such as Caltech and MIT. She's also a co-founder and CEO of Horizon, where she's helping scientists create more impact with their scientific work and publish in high-impact journals. She's also the director of the writing lab at the Tecnológico de Monterrey University. And so far, she's supported more than 2,500 publications of high-impact publications in high-impact journals and different conferences. So Samira, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm very excited to meet you. I've been following you for some time on LinkedIn and your, tips and tricks and advice for creating more impact with your publications and scientific work. So I think today's show will be useful for anyone who is, in the arena of publishing as a scientist. So maybe first give me a little background of your scientific training. How did you get into science and how did you come to do what you do today?
Absolutely. So I studied applied physics as my first degree back then in Iran. I'm Persian, so I was born and raised in Iran. So I consider myself a hardcore physicist before anything else. Then I studied my master's in polymer chemistry, and the PhD was biomedical engineering, but it had a very strong link with polymer chemistry. And of course, the natural pathway for me would be to go for a postdoc, which I did one round of postdoc at Tecnológico de Monterrey, the other one at MIT. And then I was expecting to become a professor, but I was offered a position I haven't applied to, which is a director of this unit called Writing Lab, which is targeted at training 12,000 faculty and administrators across 33 campuses at our university, providing them with all the support they need for journal publication with the aim to boost the ranking of the university. So that's where I got into it. And it was initially a passion for me to deliver that knowledge, and the extremely high production rate that I had throughout my PhD, somehow I mastered it despite all the challenges. But then we became much more systematic in our approach, developing workshops and trainings and creating the ecosystem that actually resulted in a substantial number of publications.
That's awesome. So your scientific training is obviously very directed and niched into chemistry, I guess, and physics, applied physics and chemistry. But what you're doing now, to me, it seems like it's something very broad and applicable to basically any scientist who is trying to publish. Does that mean that this impact that you're trying to create is something generalizable and not dependent on the niche?
That's a very good question, Kenan. Let me tell you something. When I was offered this position as a director of writing lab, they told me that the focus, the specific concentration is on the area of education. And that's what made me a little bit shaky because I was like, okay, what do I know about education? No, this is not my area. This is not my expertise. So I was initially quite hesitant to step into it. But then I realized, I mean, it was a professor of mine, a senior professor, he told me, for as long as you're being in a classroom to teach, you have to know something about education. So you cannot remain entirely detached from the area of education. So I stepped into it. Obviously, it took me a while to acquire the skills. That's precisely the reason why I studied later at Caltech data science to get myself into the area of machine learning, deep learning, etc., and also to step into the domain of social sciences and humanities to understand the differences between research here and there. Now you look at my profile and it's probably more heavy on the side of social sciences and humanities than the hard sciences. So I still have production related to my own discipline, my master's and PhD students, my projects ongoing. But what happened is that it has served as a blessing because it gave me the vision from two worlds, right? So I understood what it means to do hard science, what it means to do soft science, and I learned tremendous lessons from either side. And now the program, the Autonomous Author Accelerator, has created a framework that applies to anyone actually trying any discipline. So that knowledge has served a great purpose. And I'm really glad about it because back then I was feeling like, what am I doing? Is this the right path for me? But now I understand that it was actually a very good decision.
So when you work with scientists trying to help them, let's say, increase the impact or I guess also convey the impact of their publication. Sometimes the publication is good, but maybe it's not packaged in a way that other people will understand unless it's super a niche audience that will understand the impact. My question is, when you help within the writing process, does the help start even in the beginning when you think about an idea and try to brainstorm which directions to go to, or is it that you jump in only at the end when people need to kind of make it a finished product?
That's an excellent question. No, we do provide the support since the very beginning, since the moment of conceiving the idea or even prior to that. So people come from all walks of life. They come from all these different disciplines and backgrounds. Some of them already have results. Some of them are producing results. Some of them are conceiving new ideas. So we have developed a framework that allows them to first identify the research gap, understand what's there to be addressed, what's worthwhile investing the energy, the resources, and we guide them through all the steps to actualize the process. So I have developed 3 blueprints, which I pour all my intelligence and intellect into that process. And these 3 blueprints called internal validation, external validation, and aftermath validations are really powerful in a sense of first understand where you are in the world in the context of the state of the art. Second, contrast your work with the rest of the findings and see again what's your novelty, what's the contribution that you put on the table. And then aftermath is where you actually see where you're heading and what are the possible ways of creating a paper pipeline. So it's very powerful. My students say that these 3 Excels are the most simple Excel documents they've ever had in their life. So we designed this in a sense, and I consulted with scientists from different areas, like, what do you think about this? Does it apply to your discipline? Just to make sure that it's like a united solution. And it's very, very good. It's working really fine in a sense of, like you mentioned, sometimes the study is good, the way it's packaged is not good at all. Sometimes the packaging is really good, but the work itself is poor. It lacks novelty, it lacks good methodology, etc. So we have to have both, and we have to also know the psychology of the journal, so see the backstage, like behind the scene, what's going on, and that's going to help a lot. That's going to help a lot.
Speak to me about that a little bit. You mentioned a very interesting term that caught my ear. You said psychology of the journal. I've been interested in this topic for quite a while, generally in the topic of publishing. So all of the positive and negative sides that are within publishing. We have knowledge as accessible as ever. We're never gonna. It was never this easy to get access to a paper. But then on the other side, too many papers. Even when I think about my topic, which is topic of neuroimmunology in the fly, right? Like a little creature that is very niche. You wouldn't expect so many papers.
That's so
But
cool.
Yeah, I've been reading about it for, it's been 6, 7, 8 months now, and I'm still catching up. So many, many papers are out there, and there's also all of these issues like reproducibility crisis, all of the things that go along
Mm,
with publishing. But I want you to uh, take me a little bit behind the scenes, as you mentioned, the psychology of the journal. What do you mean by that?
Absolutely. I have a whole, like an entire module is dedicated to that, psychology of the journals. So let me first start by saying that this abundance of information can be a blessing and a curse at the same time, because we get lost and we really don't know where to stop, where to trust, what to trust. And apart from that, I always say this with everyone that I have a strategy call with. I say there's one thing called information, but information never means transformation. If you really want to achieve results, you have to look at the transformative part of the puzzle, not just information. You can take the entire information of the universe in, but don't do anything with it, right? So that is useless. So when it comes to journal publication, we in that framework, in the blueprint, external validation, they actually teach our students that they don't have to read everything. You don't have to read everything that's out there. So you have to be really selective. I mean, in the world, in life, we have to be super selective because there's just such variety of things that we can do with our lives, and then we have just such limited time. And so what we need to do is to really be specific. And even if we come across, I say like 20 is my magic number. I say get 20 papers that are like super niche, super close to your work. Like understand the 20 papers like the palm of your hand. But even then, don't start with reading everything, because it's just such a daunting process that is gonna just demotivate you. It's very lengthy, it's very tedious. So scan, scheme, observe like what are the things that are really relevant to you, and then go deeper and deeper as you need. Psychology of the journals, and that's definitely a very important topic. I began developing this mindset when I was doing my PhD. I remember there was a conference. It's a very funny incident that there was a conference that was held in Australia. There was a super important journal attached to the conference called Biosensors and Bioelectronics, and our professor asked all of us to send papers, to send abstracts for this conference. We did so. And we were so excited about the opportunity of getting our papers accepted at the special issue, because there was the special issue connected. So all these like hopes and dreams and, tears and excitement from a lab of 20, none of us got accepted. Like it was very disappointing. So that's when I started looking, okay, who did actually get accepted later on? Like what were the papers that got accepted? So I started browsing through them and became really obsessed with that one journal. I started from that one journal, and then I expanded my technique into analyzing other journals. So when I began analyzing that one journal, I identified something really important. I saw some similarities between the papers that got accepted. To understand the direction of the journal, the politics of the journal, their needs and necessities at the moment. What is it that the editorial panel or the editor-in-chief envisions for the journal? So all those are really important pieces of the puzzle to take into consideration. So that's where I developed this module called Psychology of the Journal, when I go like uncover the whole story about the journal and understand, okay, what does it take for my work to get accepted? So something that I did back then was that I found a couple of papers published around the same time. The study is more or less the same thing as I've done. Like, how come my paper got rejected? So what I did was started understanding their language, understanding the dynamic, how they are presenting, the quality of their images, how complex they make it. Some journals like it's simple, some journals like it's sci-fi, right? Like you have to see what they want. So I began mimicking the structure of the latest publications. So when I submitted a new manuscript, I remember my advisor told me, "Oh, come on, forget about it. Don't be too obsessed." The manuscript went through without any issues. Like I got minor and I got accepted. And it was a really high impact journal. So, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, how did you do it?" So I started practicing with more journals, and I cracked the code for Nature Scientific Reports. I cracked the code for many other important journals that, they were my obsession at some point. But then I understood what it takes to do the psychology of the journal and to be really, really aware of what exactly they want at this point in time. Because their ideas are going to change over time.
Tell me more about that. What were some things that you changed about your paper? You mentioned things of technical nature, like what kind of images, in what way maybe you package a little bit the paper, maybe you rephrase. Is it all
Absolutely.
about that, or are there other?
I gotta be honest with you, Kenan. The presentation is extremely important. Extremely important. I have an entire lesson dedicated to designing top quality images because I say there's one thing that you generate as results, there's another thing that you generate as publication quality figures. Publication quality figures is an entirely different thing. And I truly believe when you spend tremendous amount of energy and dedication, you show dedication to designing images that are impressive, that are friendly for colorblind, that are easy to understand, that are very well organized and structured, you give this initial impression to the journal that you gave a damn about your work. And it just encourages them to care for your work. When they take a look at it, they're like, wow, they really care. They invested energy. Now, I want to give you this example of one other study that actually ended up in one of the top journals I could ever dream for. It's called Carbon. And the paper that ended up in Carbon is practically talking about an entire set of failed experiments. It's like the entire thing is a failure we are reporting. But like everybody was saying, are you crazy? And I actually literally hired a designer for the design of the graphical abstract of that paper. And everybody was like, are you crazy? I mean, we're just talking about a bunch of failed experiments. I said, you know what? We're going to get accepted because it's not just about talking failure. It's about how this failure is going to open the path, because this is like a general misconception around this. So if we talk about it in the right way, it's going to get accepted. So we started putting a lot of effort into creating a very nice analysis around our failure, designing impressive images. Not only the paper got accepted, but also I was invited to send the cover of the journal, which you probably know as a scientist, like to be on the cover, it's like the most important thing that you could ever dream, where your paper, your code, your name, everything appears on the cover of the journal. So it was a huge experience for me. And another confirmation that it's just so important that you really pay attention to the details.
So two things there. One is,
go ahead, please.
Would you say that then your images and the effort that you invest in them is kind of like your first impression when you go to an interview, and how would you dress up? Is that a fair analogy? And then the second, something that is very, very important, I think, that you mentioned, and that is, you said that you use this word failed experiments. So what you mean by that is just a bunch of negative results, right? So
the hypothesis entirely failed. Like the hypothesis turned out to be wrong, and we published.
Exactly, but that's it's interesting that you use the word failure, right? Because we also, so like me as a PhD student, I see this temptation also whenever I try to do as many experiments as possible, and try to plan out, I come up with an idea, I try to test it as fast as possible, and I see, as I'm doing the imaging on the microscope, I see the temptation in my head, please let this be correct, right? Because if it's correct, then that means something cool, right?
Yeah.
I struggle to maintain the objectivity that we talk about so highly. You should be, just get the data. Data is data, no matter positive, negative, blah, blah, blah. Even though once I get the answer to that question, that allows me to shift my focus to something else, right? To understand how to proceed forward. No matter that the result is negative, right? I still perceive it as a failure. This experiment failed, even though the point of the experiment was not to prove this hypothesis, it was to give me an answer. Is it this hypothesis or is it this hypothesis, right? So kind of to shift my direction forward. And as I mentioned at the beginning, seeing negative results as, failures has kind of led to a bunch of problems in the publishing business, right? Because we are all incentivized to publish something positive, something that explains something to the highest degree, even though it might not, right? But we want it so bad that we will even make ourselves believe that it's true. So I loved some initiatives, like some journals, like recently, I think even Caltech made that journal, and you can correct me if that's wrong, Micro Publications, which is a very interesting journal, full of also negative results, right? Negative results. And as you said, the way you presented that paper, if I understand that correctly, is, okay, this is a bunch of, failed experiments, But the reason it can get accepted is that if we explain the impact of these results, it will help the scientific community in this niche go a certain direction. And that's why it's important. Am I getting that right?
Exactly. I mean, that's precisely why we do science in the first place, right? So it's not about positive or negative, what worked or what has not worked. People want to just present their, victorious moments. Oh, everything worked out fine. Everything was beautiful. I always make this a compulsory practice for my students to dedicate a section in your results and discussion or afterwards to talk about what has not worked for two main reasons. First of all, you put yourself on the safest spot against the reviewers and editors. When they see that you're a self-critic, they leave you alone, right? So they are not going to be so harsh on you because they see that you're admitting to the problems and challenges and what has not worked and what are the shortcomings yourself. More importantly is that you're actually creating a citation opportunity for yourself because everybody wants to say that everything is bright and shiny and rainbow and sunshine. If there is someone who actually talks about the problems, they're going to get some citations. They're going to get cited because people are looking for it. They're looking for the literature. With my postdoc later on from that failed experiment, we also crafted a mini review that we tried to gather everything, all the records of the literature that actually who else is saying that this thing fails. Because if it fails, there must be other brave people to also say that. And that's what I call brave lit review, right? So, and that was like a super niche, super positioning. And it, of course, got accepted in another top journal, not in Carbon. It was another journal. But I think people don't know how to leverage failed experiments. It's actually a huge opportunity to build a very strong scientific profile through the failed experiments because they add so much value.
To add to the explanation of why those experiments are so valuable and with a personal experience of how they were valuable to me. The other day, as I told you, I study neuroimmunology in the model organism, the fly. Right. And the other day I was thinking, maybe a month ago, I was thinking about, could there be, so a lot of the things that we do is just infect a bunch of flies and see what happens to them, right? So a lot of the experiments are that. And one day I was thinking, I wonder, could there be some kind of transgenerational effect? Like if I infect a fly and then I have her lay eggs, and will her babies be more susceptible to infection? Or something transmitted across multiple generations. I almost started doing those experiments. I planned out, and then I ran into a paper. I just was browsing Google Scholar, and there's a guy who likes to publish a lot of negative results. He likes science, doesn't have to necessarily publish in big journals, but he just likes answering questions. And whenever he has a small story, he puts it out there. It could be a small journal, could be a big one. And this guy just basically tested my question with 50 different bacteria, many different strains of flies, many different conditions. Turns out negative. There was no evidence for it. So he saved me probably a couple of months of just trying to play with this, and just not necessarily that I cannot try that, but he told me how I can think about it. These are kind of results that the other people get. If I'm going to build on that, it would be good that I incorporate these results in my thinking. So I think that's the value we get, because it seems like apparently every scientific paper is positively describing something. There's a discovery every second of the day, right? A positive one, right?
That just doesn't make sense. Life as we know as scientists is like 99 times you fail and then one time it works, right? But if you don't know how to leverage the 99 times failure, then what do we do at the end? And also, what I was thinking as you were talking is that this one person saved you time, but think about it, with all the fraud that's happening in the journal publication. We gotta save humanity. We gotta save future science, because if we continue on this path, that everything a lot of fabricated and retracted papers and all that's happening now, it's gonna be a very dark future for all of us. People, scientists particularly, have to come to this space of transparency, honesty, clarity, and just be open. And instead of being afraid of presenting those results that are negative, you can just develop a strategy of how I'm going to leverage them, how I'm going to increase my citation record to actually get the best from this. And eventually, the whole purpose is serving the society. The whole purpose is allowing for the science as a whole united being to build upon itself and for us to go higher and serve people.
So one thing I wanted to mention to you, and please let me mention it to you before I forget it, because I do tend to forget it. I wrote here a little note, hot topics.
Okay.
I was talking recently to my friend from Lausanne, and he is, and I guess, an owner, a recipient of this very prestigious fellowship for a postdoc. And he told me that he wrote it twice. The first time he wrote it, he got rejected. And second time he applied, he just rewrote it a little bit and he got accepted. Same fellowship. So I guess there's other variables there. But he says his initial explanation of the topic was a little bit niched, just fly and some things he wanted to evaluate. But then he realized, maybe this is not gonna fly. So he injected words into his grant, such as microbiome and a couple of others that are very hot at the moment. And but the proposal is basically the same. He's just saying what he wanted to investigate, in which context. He just added just a little bit of a parallel with the microbiome and a couple of other hot topics, and it got accepted. So now that is one, that tells me, two things. One is, about the psychology and how we are all biased towards current trending topics. But then I'm also thinking, what is it could be positive that we all focus on, I don't know, microbiome, but because it's an important topic. But are we risking devaluating or dismissing science that is equally important, but not as trendy in the moment? How do you think about that?
Absolutely. When it comes to journal publications, and I want to provide the answer in a specific case of journal publication, it's not just about like the psychology of the journal, and it's not about thinking about what they might be biased towards. It's also about the very fact that journals are a business, right? So publishing groups are, as I mentioned on my LinkedIn, and I'm always very vocal about it, is one of the most profitable businesses ever existed. So when we look at the journals from that eye, I think we would act very rationally, and so much of our feelings around papers and getting rejected and all that would melt away. Because when we look at them as a business that has a business model and follows a pathway in order to achieve certain outcomes, then we understand their decisions better. Obviously, every new editor-in-chief takes over the journal. They're going to select their own editorial panel. Everything changes, the directions, the political decisions, the priorities, everything changes. So it's really important for us to constantly remain updated what they want, what's their current thinking, and what are their expectations. Apart from that, understanding that what the journals want is eventually the type of papers, or in the case of your friend, the type of proposals that are going to attract the most readership. Because the more citations they get, the better their rankings go, and the more they can present like this rejection rate as opposed to acceptance, articles received, number of citations per citable items. So these are all matrices that they're playing with, and they run their business like that. So when we are connecting on where we shed light into this kind of trendy topics in the paper, then it is of course much more likely for us to get accepted, because this is the thing that they want. They know that the eyes are on that. For instance, one of my PhD students is working in an area of material science, pure material science, and was sure that the findings are super fundamental and they're not going to probably find their way to the top journal. So I invited him to study and learning. I invited him to get into that direction, because not only it's going to benefit him in the future, but also it would probably help the paper. So we then were probably one of the first to connect the area of material science to regression analysis, to random forest decision tree, to say from the 200 something experiment that we laid down in front of us, which ones are likely to give the best results. So I see that as a huge challenge for all of us to constantly acquire new knowledge that's trendy, and to be able to actually give the touch of that, but we can always do that with developing collaborations, with developing the right partnership. And it adds value to us too, because we learn new skills and things that seem to be really crucial, and they're going to stay around forever. So with that touch, actually, the paper got into Nature scientific reports, and it's a beautiful piece because it's not only adding value with respect to material science, but also it talks so beautifully about how we can actually predict the results of the experiments by running machine learning and not actually conducting all the 243 experiments that are time consuming, expensive, etc. So I do understand the frustrations around it, and I know that it's not an easy task to give that touch to every single article, but I think when there's a chance, why not actually taking the chance?
Recently, I read in the Cell Press, I forget, was it in the main Cell journal, from a scientist, I hope I get his name right, Michael Fischbach, I believe. And I think the paper was called, it's an opinion piece called Decision Trees and Problem Choice in Science and Engineering. So it's a little article giving advice on how to kind of ideate about scientific ideas. And the main premise is, as graduate students, you kind of spend a couple of weeks choosing what to do, and then you spend 5 years doing it, which might not be the best ratio.
Strategy.
It might be a little
True.
better to invest a little bit more in the beginning. And I'm kind of still in this exploratory phase of my PhD, and I'm thinking about what will give the highest return, which way should I go. I have this big idea, but it might take too long. Or I have these couple of smaller ideas, but I'm not super happy doing a couple of small ideas. So I have to find a compromise. Do you have any tactics on how to ideate for the highest impact idea or the highest impact problem you might want to solve as a early career scientist?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I'm going to use your own example, right? So if I would want to tell you what I think about your direction, I would say go with the bigger one. You don't have to finish everything in one shot, right? So it's a continuous process. And as we move forward, we actually can't refresh the entire project, but a PhD is just one part of the story, right? So if we have enough results to show that, okay, 1, 2, 3 worked, but maybe the actual project goes up to 10 or 20 as a scale, if you think about it. We just got this part done, good, fantastic, but then I have my postdoc, I have my research fellowship, I have my professorship, I'll hire students, I'll keep going, right? So I'll keep going and keep exploring. So I think it's really important that we don't feel so frustrated and so afraid of what might work or what might pay off in a short span of time while I have the scholarship, etc. Because there are cases of PhD students, by the way, that their entire effort gone to waste, right? Like the entire process was wasted, like the hypothesis did not work, but they graduated on that. Again, science is science. It's valuable. It's precious. Every piece of advance, that also is considered to be the advancement of science, because, like you said, it shows everybody else what not to do. So I wouldn't be so concerned about that. I would be concerned about taking the time and reading and exploring and diving deep and trying to also be super detail oriented in a way, because there are sometimes go back and correct things. It's going to be costly. But to have a very nice pathway laid in front of us, and then to move forward, and as much as we got done within the frame of a PhD that grants us the doctorate degree, that's perfectly fine, and then we move forward with the rest. I also want to take the opportunity and to suggest to the students who don't have the opportunity of having the right advisor by their side, right? So I talk to a lot, and they come to me and they write to me that, when my advisor doesn't really know anything about my project or doesn't support me whatsoever. So I say, write to the experts, find the experts, see who are the people who have a voice in your discipline, in your niche, and write to them. And I know of many students who actually finishing their PhD with the advisors, like virtual advisors that are from every corner of the world, the scientists who were kind enough to offer the support to these people. to be able to really validate their idea, not to move along on their own in their isolation, because I think one of the most frustrating things for all the scientists, regardless of their discipline, regardless of whether they have a good advisor or not, is the isolation, is working in isolation. So we have to really break free from that, because the scientific community is rich, we are large, we're sharing all sort of expertise, and we have to be more open to talk to each other and seek.
I think that's a wonderful message. And it's something that applies in particular to, I guess, my community of scientists, which are the fly people. I think we are kind of known to be very collaborative, or I think, of course, every field is competitive and everybody's trying to get somewhere first and discover something first. But I think my field and my community is very sharing. Like you can
That's
basically do
awesome.
this, send an email, say, this is what I'm working on. Would you offer some advice, or maybe offer some mutant flies that you have? And the community is very open to share the resources and knowledge. So I think that's one big valuable thing. I hope all other communities can accept that as well. How do you go, and at what stage do you go about choosing a journal? I mean, there's just so many. I probably narrow down when I'm thinking about what I'm reading. I'm reading maybe 2, 3, 4 publishers, and within them, maybe a couple of top journals that are relevant to me. Sometimes I will go outside of that if there's something interesting. But other than that, there's thousands of journals. So how does one go about the process of narrowing down, like what can I
Absolutely.
shoot for, so to speak, and how to choose properly? Because to then dive into the psychology of the journal, you can't dive into 2,000 journals psychologies.
No, absolutely
So how
not.
would you go
No.
about that?
So, in parentheses, I was talking to a friend. I mean, he's a colleague. I don't know him much, but I just knew that he studied psychology. And I told him, "What kind of psychology?" He says, "It's spatial psychology." And I was like, "What is that?" And he says, "Psychology of the people in the space, those who go to Mars." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, the whole thing was like, "My God, I never thought people out there need psychologists." So now talking about psychology of the journal. So this is a very good question. When do we decide on the choice of journal? Before we start crafting the article.
Oh,
After that,
okay. I would never have thought
it's
of that.
pointless. Before you begin crafting your article, we have to find the right choices of journals, because the right choice of the journal will set the tone for the paper. The expectations of the journal, the framework of the journal, the quality of the papers that they are published in their last issues, it's going to set the tone for what kind of effort I'm going to put into it to make sure that that's part of the psychology of the journal. I teach that in phase 1, why, where, and when in the autonomous author accelerator. So we teach how to actually come into that understanding of this much results I have. Is this enough? Well, it depends on the journal. What is the choice of journal? The enough part of it actually finds meaning in the context of what kind of journals we want to target. So then we go ahead. There are 2 ways, Kenan. It's either through a systematic search for the journals that we come across the right ones. So we develop the query code, we extract the information, we can do search by category or search individually with the query code that we have, and then we take down the journals and then we try to decide from there. My favorite method is that go the reverse engineering. Your list of references are your best source for selecting journals, right? So the list of references, that the papers that you read most frequently, again, I want to suggest that we should not remain limited to certain publishers or certain journals just because they're the top in the field, because some scientists, honestly, they don't care. I know super senior scientists with amazing results. So like, I don't care about the rankings and matrices and quartiles. I publish wherever is relevant. So my strategy would be to do a systematic search, take down, develop the query code with all the relevant keywords, go to major databases, pull down everything that is relevant to us, do a bit of a filtration, and then come across the papers that are the most relevant, take down the journals list, and begin analyzing them. So once we start categorizing them, so these are the top 10%, that are the top whatever, we decide, I typically have five choice before I start the manuscript. So I also guide my students like that. Go for, of course, preferably quartile 1, and then go down the list. But to analyze, then it's a lot easier to focus on 3 to 5 journal and do the psychology of the journal instead of, like you mentioned, doing it for 2,000 journals. So that's how I teach my students to select. And then once they are in love, once they are obsessed, then it's all easy. You know, it's just easy to make them work. Like one of the questions in the psychology of journal is that, will you be able to put your results in the frame of the latest publications of this journal? If the answer is yes, if you can do something like that, if you can make something like that, then the answer is yes. Okay, we go for it. Let's start graph.
So you would say, based on the references that you have from whatever you're reading, whatever your field is in, whoever is relevant is publishing in these, let's say, 20 journals. That's kind of your primary list. And then you make a list of the ones that your research might fit in the most and might be the highest impact, I guess. And I suppose you would make some kind of a tier list, if I get my dreams come true, this will be the journal. And then this is, something I don't dream about so
Absolutely.
often. And then third one is, maybe I'm not dreaming about it at all. So you would say about 5 of them. What are some other criteria? So let's say how relevant it is, how important it is within your niche. What else would you say is important for choosing a journal?
Sure, definitely. What are the restrictions? Sometimes you have like way too much. Like the word count is sometimes students come to me like, oh, I have a 12,000. 12,000? Why did you have the 12,000 words manuscript? Like, okay, if the journal is accepting only 3,000, if it's a letter structure, or if they are like limited to 5,000, 7,000, only 3 images, 2 tables, like, no, there is no way for you to chop down your paper unless you want to create a supplementary section and sacrifice everything to go in the supplementary. So we have to be also aware of how likely it is for our findings to fit in the picture of the journal. Like I've published letters that they ask 3,000 words, 2 images. Like that's it. Like if it's a big work, I can't. There is no way for me to fit that. Now, concerning the niche, I mean, I'm going a bit off topic, but I just remembered something that is really important to add to the previous question you had. Sometimes it's actually tremendously beneficial to not be so concerned about the niche and go a little bit out and target either multidisciplinary journals or journals that are slightly outside like that very, very tiny niche, but they would welcome and they would receive the paper, and then it gives a fresh new readership to the paper. So I think that's also particularly knowing that when it comes to the PhD level, when it comes to the very high levels of scientific achievements and discoveries, like almost all these areas are merged together, like there is no way to separate chemistry from physics, from biology, from mathematics. They're all together. So the multidisciplinary journals are precious in the sense that it allows the fresh readership to come to your article and everyone benefits from their own perspective. And it's also probably less harsh in the sense of review when it comes to the reviewing process, because when it's like too technical and those guys are the gods of whatever, then they're going to be like poking into every corner, right? They're going to be super strict. But in a sense of more open viewpoint towards multidisciplinary studies, they're actually sometimes a lot easier to deal with.
Once read a comparison of, where you publish your paper it's just a billboard, right? In a sense, a big journal means a bigger billboard, more people see it, and that's it. And some people then say, well, if it's just a billboard, I don't care. All I care is, as you said, all I care is that my science is good and it's going to make an impact on my selected 5 people that read it, right? Why is it important to publish in a higher impact journal? Is it just because of our career? What are other benefits to even try to publish in a higher impact journal? Is it just a billboard or is it something more?
You reminded me of this memory that I have from my master's, because back then we were all so fascinated by a number of journals because they were like super trendy, high impact, etc. And there is this one journal called Langmuir, with the impact factor 3. It's not even like big, but it's been there like for the past 50 years and they're doing amazing and they kept their prestige. And I remember I was talking to one of the old professors in the Department of Chemistry. I said, I want to publish in Nature. I was like, when you publish one paper in Langmore, you come here and talk to me. So there are certain journals that kept their prestige regardless of all these matrices. So I want to say it's important, but to a certain level. So I don't want the scientific community to be so concerned with those numbers, because like in the end of the day, those numbers are easy to manipulate. We have to also understand, I've seen so many manipulations around the journals like this, impact factors going up, and you see backstage there are a lot of things happening, right? So
Well, I totally.
criminal psychology or stuff this way. But what I want to bring to your attention and to the attention of everyone who's listening is how much trust it can generate in others. Like we were talking about it today. This morning, I had a mentoring session with the students of the Autonomous Water Accelerator. I said, when you publish your work in certain places, no one's going to cite them because I mean, they may read it and they're like, okay, I just don't know if I can trust this source. Right? Even though the peer-reviewed journals are unfortunately becoming also not much trustworthy because of all these general problems that we have in the peer review system, no compensation, no incentives. People are like, yeah, whatever, just let me get this out of my system. Editors, reviewers, to add one more to their profile. So I think concerning all this, but nevertheless, down the line, they always look into the reputation of the journal as whether this paper is trustworthy, whether it's a good source for me to cite. We, for instance, in the systematic reviews, we ask the students to exclude Q3 and Q4, and like at least Q4, exclude Q4 and pay attention to the top journals, because we just want to make sure that these studies have gone through a decent, assessment. Same thing applies to the archives. For instance, we have submitted a paper to a journal, and then the reviewer came back to us like, where is this one paper that you cited? Like it was an archive, but for whatever reason it was taken down because either someone tested it or someone objected. So there is no solid ground for any of that. That would be my concern. And I also think that we scientists have been brought up as partly diplomats. The way it looks now, it just forced us into having a diplomatic approach towards what contributes towards our future as scientists, in addition to what contributes to science as whole.
What do you mean by that? We become diplomat? I'm not sure I understand that.
It's like all that we have to cope with, there's like a number of publications per year, H index, and like we cannot be, it's not like 100 years ago where people do science for the sake of science. We have to have one eye on all these matrices and like calculate very carefully how we're going to get the tenure track, how we're going to get this, how we're going to get that, or how we're going to be promoted, or what shortcuts I have to take in order to get to the associate level. And so, but at the same time, we also want to do science for the joy of science. But sadly, we don't have that freedom. We don't have that privilege anymore.
There was one, how to call it, a meme, a quote, a picture with a quote of some famous physicist. Well, I don't know, was it Peter Higgs or someone saying, I don't think I'd be competitive in today's academia. I didn't publish enough papers back in the 40s. I had one paper, discovering this thing that might be proven 50 years later, make me famous. But I don't think I'd be publishing enough. And probably if I was forced to publish this much, I wouldn't be focused on what I was focusing 50, 60 years ago. So it's an interesting state of academia and publishing today. So speaking of which, I think that's the last thing I want to touch on before we wrap it up. And that is the state of publishing. So what are some major, I guess, issues or concerns you have with the current models that we have? You mentioned, for example, no compensations for reviewers. Of course, everybody's doing it for free. So when somebody sees they have to review a paper, they're like, I have to review a paper now. I have a week. I was going to have a meeting this week. So, and do you see any of that improving in the next couple of years, let's say?
No, it's not good. I always say the system is totally broken, and I really don't know how it's going to resolve, because it's a vicious cycle if the reviewers and editors don't care, because they're already overloaded with so much responsibility, and we all know that academia doesn't pay well. So people are working really long hours and they're tired of their day-to-day responsibilities. They don't want anything extra on their plates. But then the journals, I was chatting with my team members the other day because they're all associate editors of top journals. How many manuscripts per month do you get? How many do you get? Because I was going to compare it with mine to see how many my editor-in-chief is assigning, because I felt it's too much. And even for taking a time off from these kind of responsibilities where my parents are visiting me, I had to write to him like, I don't want to edit any other, like at least for this period of 2 weeks, because I have other commitments. And he gets back to me, oh, are you going to stay editor-in-chief, associate editor or what? Because everybody else is taking care of 10 papers simultaneously. And I sent him a screenshot of my responsibilities. Like over the past few years, I've taken care of 50 articles. I'm just asking for a couple of weeks of off because my parents are visiting. So and it's not, I'm not even getting paid. So this is unfair, you know. The system is very, very, very unfair. It's unfair to the reviewers and the editors both. And then what it's going to create is that people are going to do that because that's the only way that their CV is going to look good, and they're going to apply for senior member here or associate member there or whatever. But the quality of science is what's suffering here. And it's going to just go down. It's a very, very scary landscape. And if we continue this way, it's going to be really bad.
Is there any indication that any of these most profitable journals, you mentioned that it's the most profitable business of all time, probably. I don't know how many billion-dollar industry it is, but is there any indication that peer reviewers might get paid? And please don't laugh if it sounds like a joke.
No, actually, recently something happened that made me feel like good. I'm happy. You know, my boss shared that news that I think under one of the massive publishers, more than 100 journals have to close down because of the number of offers, you know, like retracted articles. So the journals went down the hell in their business because of the number of retracted articles. So that's the byproduct. If it continues this way, they would have no other choice but to actually create a compensation scheme so that people start doing a decent job. Reviewers would pay attention. Like how many of these articles we see, like with the ChatGPT phrases being published late, it's because nobody cares, nobody listens, nobody even looks. And that's where I also help my students in the program that read the comments carefully. There is a very high chance that actually what they're asking is already in your manuscript, but you just don't have time to read. And I can't blame them. I can't blame my own colleagues because, like, come on. How much work do they have to carry out, and how much of it is actually for free?
Maybe one last thing.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the AI phrases in the scientific papers, and obviously I've noticed that as well. And some major incidents were happening recently. You know, mid-journey generated images, completely unedited. You know, I'm not sure if you've seen that.
I know, they were a source of laughter. I love them.
Yes, or you know, introduction that says, "Sure, I will write an introduction."
Certainly.
Yeah, exactly. So, how do you see AI being? I think some journals are incorporating AI into the review system itself. So, trying to automate the review so that the AI is doing the review and there's minimal human supervision. How do you see AI integrating into the scientific publishing process?
Absolutely. I don't see any problem with that. We just have to be intelligent how we're going to use it. I do highly encourage everybody really mastering it. It's another thing that if we don't master now, we're going to regret in the future. So we do have a lot of resources related to AI in my program, and we highly encourage all the students to use it. The way I use it, it's like my personal assistant. I use it for everything, but it's not that I depend on it. I don't ask the AI to do the job for me, but I ask smart questions that it can actually educate me without me needing to browse through tons of books and then finding, you know, the papers. Like I have read books and then I can't remember, okay, in which part was this concept? So I say in the book, blah, 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 where did that? And it just gives me that whole overview of the book with all the points that I was actually looking for. So in my opinion, it's just a smart thing to actually leverage AI heavily. And within the submission platforms, I submit papers very frequently. At no point it says that you're actually not allowed to use it. Just says that you acknowledge that you've used, and it's that the intellectual contribution is yours. It's not like entirely AI, because let's be honest. I mean, they are limited to a certain extent. I recently had a meeting with people from Google Cloud, and they were very proud of Gemini and how they have incorporated this system that can actually help the scholars. And I told them that I really enjoy working with Gemini and work with it. It's incredible, like compared to, in my opinion, compared to ChatGPT, it has really good options and functions. So I don't see why not, but we just gotta be smart. It's like, to me, it's like internet. At the beginning, it was like this controversial thing. And of course, there's dark web and people can do whatever with it. But like, imagine our life without internet. Seriously, can we even imagine it?
We would not be talking today. That is certain.
Absolutely not.
So I'm sure at some point there will be an integrated reviewer, act like reviewer to my paper, so that it can criticize everything about it, so it can improve it. So hopefully that will serve for positive purposes to improve science and the integrity of the whole process. Tell me, for the end, what is the Autonomous Author Accelerator? So you mentioned it a couple of times, you touched upon it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can people get involved with that? Is that something that you do just within your writing lab? What is it? Can people apply?
No, it's absolutely. It's a separate entity from writing lab. So it's my own business. So Autonomous Author Accelerator is a signature program aimed at helping scientists publish, in top-tier journals. It doesn't matter which discipline, it doesn't matter at which stage of their publication. We have students from all the way from undergrad who are really passionate about writing, but the vast majority are actually faculty members who really understand the necessity. So we developed a framework that works for all disciplines. It's a beautiful space because there's a community, there's a lifetime access features, so mentorship on a weekly basis, mastermind community, and these guys are extremely supportive of each other. It's so beautiful to watch them. There's chance for constant checking with the manuscripts, getting feedbacks, and it's really precious. And I can see how the amazing results are coming from the training. Application is by it's not open, like it's not there is not a platform that I say, oh yeah, and follow this link and you're in. So every person that wants to apply, they have to be interviewed, and we select who we want to work with. And the reason why is because we have all these lifetime features. We want to make sure that we bring on board people who are going to be really committed to delivering resuls and really committed to a bigger picture, right? So that's the whole point.
So if I wanted
up
to
and
apply,
running.
so if I wanted to apply, how would it look like, my onboarding? So I would pay this, let's say, lifetime access because I want this community. I would get, I'm imagining, some feedback every week or every month, and this community, is that how it looks like? Do we hang out? Do we have meetings? How does it look like for the experience?
Let me tell you. So once you pass the strategy call and the interview, we invite you to officially join. So you would enroll to the program for all the features, like it's one-time enrollment and that's it. And the training lasts for 8 weeks, and we train. Actually, I'm now envisioning to expand the programs, also include books and book chapters, conference papers, because I get those kind of questions from the students. So I see how passionate they are, and I said, okay, why not? I can expand to even up to editorial notes, because we might have soon, hopefully, editors also. The students developing to that level. So 8 weeks of training, in addition to lifetime access to weekly mentoring. So weekly mentorings happen 2 hours every Saturday. It was actually right before I joined the podcast today, where the students pre-submit their questions and we offer answer. Like we were reviewing one paper today, it comments on every single part of it. We are mentors from different backgrounds and disciplines. Then the mastermind community is an exclusive community for the students only. They can ask questions and get answer right there instead of waiting for the Saturday session. We typically get back to them if it's a short answer by writing, if not by recording a little video. But what is a really beautiful thing about the mastermind is that they celebrate their achievements and they encourage each other so much. So that's a very nice boost of energy. And also there are revision clubs. So every time a student of the program gets a revision, we form a revision club and we help that one student to shape up the revision in the best possible way. We also do have one-time English editing, 2 times plagiarism check by Turnitin, in addition to an editorial opinion. That part is really important. So once the manuscript is ready, we pay, we're not like journals, we pay to an editor from a top journal in your discipline to review your article and give you detailed feedback, whether it's ready to go or not. And with that blessing, there's a much higher likelihood of the paper get accepted.
That's awesome. So if I'm not still, let's say, ready to invest, but I would like to follow up with your work and your advice and maybe get in touch, kind of explore the Autonomous Author Accelerator, where can I find you, Samira, and where can I find your work? Where will best keep up?
Absolutely. Oh, well, I'm like I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and majority of the clients come to me on LinkedIn. But I'm going to send you my calendar as well. So over in the calendar, we do have all the available spots. It's they should answer a short questionnaire, and we set up a strategy call. We see what are the needs and necessities, what kind of research, what's the character of the candidate, and as soon as we have them officially invited, that's it. They are more than welcome to join. So here
Awesome.
is the link. I'm going to send it to you, and please feel free to also share it with whoever is listening this.
That's great. I'll make sure that it's in the link somewhere in the description of the video.
Thank you
Samira, thank you
so
so much.
much.
It's been a pleasure. I feel like we could have talked more, but I think that gives us reason to meet again sometimes, maybe next year or in a couple of
Absolutely.
months.
It would be my pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank
So
you
it was
for
a
the
pleasure.
opportunity. And I really wish all the luck for everyone out there who is really struggling with paper publication. The moment we realize that rejection is like something that knocks at the door of every single person, we feel differently about rejection. We don't feel so discouraged. Please understand that so often than not, it's not about your work. It's like, as I said, the political direction of the journal. They're so concerned about these numbers and keeping their matrices up. So keep trying. There's always there's always a journal for your manuscript. So keep moving forward.
All right, everyone, follow Samira Hosseini on LinkedIn and check out the Autonomous Author Accelerator. I surely will, because I'm getting interested. Thank you, Samira, and till next time.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Bye.